Okay, my name is Mary Larson, and today is October 22nd, 2010. I'm visiting here with Sue Cupp-Warren on the Oklahoma State University campus in Stillwater, Oklahoma. This interview is one of a series with members of the OSU class of 1960 who were on campus for their 50th-year reunion, and this is part of the O State Stories project of the Oklahoma Oral History Research Program. Sue, welcome back to OSU for your 50-year reunion. Were there some special reasons why you decided to come back for this particular reunion?
Yes, it's been so exciting. We always like to come back to campus. I've had such fond memories here. And in fact, I met my husband here, and my daughter went to school here in the 90s. And we always just love coming back so much. It's just a beautiful campus. We all three got a good education here and have been what I consider had a very good life from the education that we did obtain while we were here.
What are some of the things you're interested in seeing and doing while you're back here on campus?
Well, we walked around yesterday evening. We came up from Lawton, where we live now, and we walked around and were amazed at the student union renovations. I just could not believe they were adding 350,000 square feet and $63 million project, and we couldn't hardly get around for all the construction. So it was real different, and we walked up toward the stadium, and it's amazing. It's been a couple of years since I've been back, but there's so many changes, so many new buildings. This Alumni Center is just wonderful.
Isn't it gorgeous?
It is, it is.
So before we get into your career at OSU, would you tell me a little bit about where you grew up and a little about your early life?
I grew up in southwestern Oklahoma, about halfway between Altus and Hobart on Highway 19, 7.5 miles east of Blair, Oklahoma. And we're noted around that area for what's considered Lugert or Quartz Mountain. And my parents were farmers, and I was very much into 4-H club. And I had, my dad had two brothers that were here, and aunts. Well, I guess after the war was over, my uncles come back here, and one of my dad's brothers was a county agent for several years. He was in Roger Mills County, Okfuskee County, and Kingfisher County. And so the family has a pretty long line of OSU family. My other uncle helped with the landscaping here when it was being done around the student union and all in the 40s. And his major was, I guess, agronomy or something to do with plants and shrubs and that. And then I started here in 1958. I grew up on a farm that we still own the farms, and I grew up on the North Fork of the Red River, and I had a great home life. We had to work really, really hard because we raised cotton and had to harvest the cotton and the maize, and my dad would always plant watermelons and cantaloupes, and we had huge watermelons and cantaloupes, and we had a big orchard when I was a kid. We always had big gardens, and my mom canned and sewed, and we had chickens. I entered my broilers in the broiler shows at Altus at Jackson County, and I entered pigs and cattle, and just we had really a great school and community at Warren, in which we still have a senior citizen center there, which I go over. Even though I live in Lawton, I go over about every Tuesday because they have a senior citizens night, and they have hamburgers and hot dogs and have live music by some of the old timers. And so we go over there and enjoy the music and seeing cousins and old friends. And it's still a very close-knit community, even though we lost our school in about 1961. The Friendship School burned, and so they were going to do away with a lot of the rural schools in Jackson County, and they decided to build a school down in the Navajo community, which was about 3 miles from where I grew up. That was my grandpa's place, where my grandma and Grandpa Cup lived. And they built the school down, they built a new school called Navajo down there. And so then they bused the kids from Warren and all around there to that new school. But the old school building is still standing. There's people that live there. But we do have our first old community building at Warren was a Quonset hut. And then about 5 years ago, with the help of the people in the community to build it and some government funding, we did get a wonderful new big senior citizen center there at Warren. So the community is still thriving. They have Sunday lunch that for people in the community. There's a lot of people from Altus or Hobart or whatever that come for Sunday lunch. They have Monday breakfast and lunch, and then Tuesday night music, and then we have a volunteer fire department there. And the community is still pretty much intact. They've built about 5 new big nice homes there around in the farming community where I grew up.
About how many people are there now?
Not very many, probably a couple of hundred actually there in the little town of Warren. There's a cafe and 2 churches and the fire department and the senior citizens, and they gave the old Quonset hut to the fire department when we got the new senior citizens built. And then there's a cemetery where my great-grandparents, my grandparents, and my parents are buried.
So when
and
did
my
your
first
family,
husband.
When did your family come to Oklahoma?
It was about the late 1800s. They came from Tazewell, Tennessee, and a few years ago we went through there, and there is a Cup cemetery which we visited that my great-great-grandparents were buried there, and then it's on a road about 25 miles from Tazewell up in the mountains. It's called Cupp's Ridge.
So you have your own family ridge. Not many people can say that.
So, but it was interesting. We got a hold of my dad and 2 of his brothers and their wives all went up there for a family reunion several years ago. And so we got a hold of one of the cousins that still lived there, and she could direct us up to the old family, up the road to the old family cemetery. But no, I grew up about 3/4 of a mile east of Warren, Oklahoma, and then we lived in 2 different houses when, well, 3 I guess. I was born about a little ways west of Warren, and then in 1944 we moved down. My dad bought a farm on the river, and we lived there from 1944 to 1956. And then in 1956, when my Papa Cup died, my grandmother moved to Blair, which is about 8 miles. And then we moved into that house my junior year in high school. And so we were about 3/4 of a mile from the school, from the Warren School where I went to school. And I got a good education there. I was able to go on to college. And
What was it that drew you to OSU?
well, of course, my family, that's all I heard. Southwestern Oklahoma is a very strong Oklahoma State University base. And of course, with the agriculture and the extension, and that's really all I ever heard. When I did graduate from high school, I guess I wasn't quite ready to come this far, because we had been up here when my uncles and aunts were here for their graduations and different things on campus. But I started my summer out of high school in 1957 to Southwestern at Weatherford, because it was only about an hour from home. And I started up there, went the first summer, and the next year and that summer, and then the next fall in '58, I transferred to Oklahoma State and graduated in 3 years and 4 summers.
What was your major?
Vocational home economics.
Is that what you'd planned on going into when you went to college, or were you not sure?
When I first started, I had kind of thought about business, but then with the influence of my 4-H and my family, and my uncle was already extension agent at that time, and I was acquainted with some of the extension people. I kind of leaned that way.
So you had an eye to working with the extension or something similar when you graduated?
I had some very strong mentors in the extension field through the years as I was growing up, and I think they had a really good influence on me, directing me.
And who were some of those people that you
George McKeag was one of our extension agents in Jackson County. And then Errol Hunter was from our community, from Warren, and he was the director of the OSU extension here in Stillwater at the time. And so we knew him, and he was extension. And then after he left, Jimmy Netherton, his another one that grew up at Warren, became extension. I don't know who all you remember here, but
it seems to be, I was going to say, there's a strong extension background in that neck of the woods.
Yes.
Well, within your major, what were some of the classes you remember, or even outside of your major? Were there things that had a particular impact on you?
Oh, yes. Well, I remember in my foods chemistry, we had to draw for one of our final tests. We had to draw to see what foods we had to prepare. And my lab partner and I believe she was Pakistani. I don't remember her name, it's been too long, but I can see her face. And we drew rhubarb sauce. I would have been lost except for my grandmother Cup used to raise rhubarb, and she would make strawberry rhubarb pies. So we had to take the rhubarb and prepare it and from scratch, and that was part of our final test. So we got out. I was accustomed to using a pressure cooker because my mother canned a lot, and we also, Mom would pressure roast or pot roasted potatoes and carrots, and just a wonderful pressured meal. And so we got the pressure cooker out and we pressured that rhubarb, cleaned it, and pressured it, and added some sugar, and I believe we added some red food coloring to make it look like, more rhubarb, because it wasn't all that red, best I can remember. And so we made it through foods chemistry.
That was certainly a trial by fire. So they, at the end of that course, it was, how much of your final grade was based on?
I think it was a third of our, and that was over in the old nutrition, foods and nutrition building, which is on, from this is what, Hester? Okay, it was up there, about halfway between here and the stadium on the west side.
Okay.
And so we had to walk all the way from homemaking the HES building over here, and at that time it seemed like a long walk across campus to make our classes, you know. But that's one of the things that come to mind, you know, that at first we were aghast that we would have to fix a dish like that, because we thought we would have to do something common, you know. But anyway, we got through that. And then Dr. Elsie Wolf was our home management supervisor. And Jerry Gill asked me, what do you remember about your senior year? And I said, well, not very much. My husband and I got married in September of 1959. We would have been married 50 years last year. He passed away in '04. And so we got married. I started my senior year. I had to live in the home management house and one semester, and then do my student teaching. And so I was pretty busy my senior year. But we had two home management houses then. Dr. Elsie Wolf was the supervisor of what we call the new home management house north of the campus. And Betty Brannon was supervisor of the south home management house. Well, everybody said Dr. Wolf was really, really strict. Well, anyway, I drew the stricter. So I participated in the new home management house under Dr. Wolf. And that was quite an experience. We had to go there early, have breakfast, and then go to class. And that winter was so cold, we had to walk from the home management house to HES in the snow and cold, and then go back up there for our meals and to run that house. We had to do the grocery shopping and everything. And we usually didn't get away from there until about 10 o'clock every night, because we had to.
And did you do that your first semester senior year, or was that second semester?
That was I believe that was the first semester of my senior year.
So that must have been tough. You'd just gotten married, and then you're involved in the home management house from early in the morning until 10 o'clock at night. And
my husband was working at Safeway.
Mm-hmm.
And then the second semester we did our student teaching at Glencoe, where Larry Shell is from. And I taught with his mother-in-law, Maxine Childers. And she had 5 daughters. And he's married to one of those daughters, Christy, who I taught in 1960, 61, I guess it was. And that was a great year. It was an old school. It had holes in the floor, a wood floor, and my high heels would catch in the board, you know. But we had a great superintendent. We had a great principal. Mr. Horace Smith, who we call Smitty, even though he was superintendent, he liked to be called Smitty. And he was our superintendent. And then Mr. Thomas was our principal. And then all of the teachers were so great. And Jack Pritchard was the vocational FFA teacher.
Okay.
When I was FHA teacher. And so we just had a great working relationship. And then after I left, they got a brand new school.
Never fails.
But it was a good year. And then I moved to San Antonio and taught second grade, actually, down there.
Okay. Well, if we can go back a little bit to some of your classes and your teachers. You mentioned a few faculty members who were influential in your development at school. Are there others whom you haven't mentioned that had an impact?
Let's see. I think Miss Carter, did I mention her? Foods and Nutrition. Dr. Wolf. Of course, Dr. O'Toole. Leila O'Toole was dean then. And oh my goodness, Miss Anna Mae Johnson was I believe was her name, was my advisor. Oh my goodness, it's hard to remember. I believe Dr. Greenwood was HNID, and that was a nice course. And then I can't remember the other man's name that was one of our interior design. During that time, it just seemed like that the college was starting to boom, College of Human Environmental Sciences. And then I stayed connected with the Oklahoma vocational group and the American Home Economics Association group for several years after that. And I just felt that I got such a good education that I was able to do a lot of different occupations with the background of work that I had gotten here. Everyone was so helpful, and it just seemed like that everyone was so professional here, and I admired that in a lot of my instructors.
If we could talk maybe a little bit about student life outside of the classroom. Where did you live when you were on when you were going to school here?
My first year I lived in Willard Hall.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a woman of Willard, and that was a really good experience. Lived on I think it was the 3rd floor on the south side, and could overlook Theta Pond, basically. And then that next year, we got married and we lived in an apartment up, I believe it was on Duck Street up here north of the campus. But my last summer here, when I graduated, I had tailoring and tennis. And that was a really good summer. I enjoyed all my classes, and we had a good time playing tennis. And I'm not real sure, but I think that Mike Holder was our tennis instructor.
Ah.
And he's, of course, athletic director now. If it wasn't him, I don't know. I didn't get to go back and look at my yearbook to see specifically, but whoever it was, we had a really good time playing tennis that summer. And,
now, when you were in the residence hall, did you have, when you were at Willard, did they host dances and other activities?
oh yes, I can remember as we were walking through the student union yesterday evening. I just commented to Danny that this is where, we used to come and spend time, and of course the bebop, Elvis Presley was popular then, and we just had some great times, and we wore those big poodle skirts and those loafers and bobby socks, and we had a great time. We had a really good time. We had a lot of nice entertainment, dances, and one thing, I believe it was in '59, we always went to all the wrestling matches because my late husband started here before I did, and he actually started in basketball, and he worked at Bennett he lived in Bennett, I believe, and he worked at Cordell in the cafeteria, and he was going to play basketball. He was 6'4", real good basketball player, but he always liked the sports here and everything. So that year, we went to the wrestling match, and we were sitting on the floor watching it. It was, the arena was packed, and they came in and took pictures, and then we were on the front cover of the Sports Illustrated. I guess this was 1959, and I've been intending to look that up too, because my daughter remembers it because her dad would mention, that to her off and on through the years. And we were talking about that the other day, and she said, remember Dad used to say that we made the front page of Sports Illustrated?
Well, if we can find that, we'll scan a copy and send you the electronic file.
Oh, okay.
If we have that at the library, we will get you a copy.
But that was interesting.
You mentioned the student union being one place that was a big student hangout on campus.
Mm-hmm.
What were some of the other places, either off or on campus?
The Baptist Student Union, we would, friends and I would go there a lot, and that's kind of where my late husband and I started dating, and we would play basketball. There was a basketball court out on the back of it, hoops, and boys and girls would play together, And so we played a lot of basketball over there and hung out at the Baptist Student Union. And we did, like I say, went to a lot of the sporting events. He enjoyed football and baseball and wrestling, and we went to a lot of the musical things, and then the sporting events. And then our daughter came here in 91, and so she was in the band, marching band, the spirit band. She traveled with the basketball team and the concert band. So starting somewhere about 1990, we started buying season tickets, because we had moved back from Texas to Oklahoma in 1980. We went the gamut around, from Oklahoma to San Antonio to Houston. Well, he was at Fort Hood, and then back around. And then in 1980, we moved back to Lawton, to Oklahoma. And our daughter was 7, starting in the 2nd grade. And so then, of course, she was being brainwashed, so we would come to Stillwater. And there was never any question where she was going to school. And her junior year in high school, the band, the OSU band, came through Lawton, and they were on their way to a ball game at TCU. And we housed all of the band members. Our Comanche County Alumni Club we housed all of the band members for that overnight. The band came and played at the halftime of the football game in Cameron Stadium, and then we took the kids all, and we had like 5 or 6 girls at our house, and that was a great thing for her to get to interact with those band members. And then the next year, when we brought her and dropped her off at school, it was harder on me than it was on her, because she had all these friends that she had met and kind of stayed in contact with her senior year. And so we let her out, and she just tooled right on over there to the Sheraton Center, just happy as she could be after we got her unpacked at Kerr Drummond. And I cried all the way home to Lawton.
Well, speaking of student activities, what kinds of things were you involved with when you were in college?
I was in the, I was in the homemaking, I guess the Omicron New, was that the honors homemaking organization. And I really can't remember. Like I say, it was a lot of classroom and studying and preparing lesson plans for student teaching, and home management house.
Well, and if you got through that quickly, you were taking a lot of credit, so you probably wouldn't have had time for much else.
I didn't have time for a lot. It just kind of seems like a whirlwind today, but it was good, and I was really happy to graduate.
What were some of the student traditions during the time you were at OSU?
Oh, student traditions.
Did they have Howdy Week that you remember, or Emphasis Weeks, where they had maybe an Ag Week or an Engineering Week? Do any of those sound familiar?
I think they did, but I don't really remember a lot of the different. I remember homecoming, was a big thing, and of course the ball games, and I guess we were more geared into the sporting events.
Mm-hmm. Did they still throw guys in Theta Pond when they got pinned or engaged?
Yes, they did.
Did
Yes,
your
they
husband
did.
get thrown in when you got engaged?
I don't remember. I bet he did, but I don't remember that. But I think that I was in Willard when they were throwing the bras out the window, but I don't want you to put that.
Well, okay. So that
British.
Well, speaking of things like that, when you were there, they would have had curfews for the dorms?
Yes.
Were the men's and women's curfews different? Do you recall? I mean, do you remember anything about that?
I know. I think I had to be back over there by 8 o'clock every night, and I think the guys were a little different.
Mm-hmm.
I think
Was there ever any grumbling about that, or?
No, I can't remember that there were, because it seems like in my time, we were pretty disciplined. Our parents had pretty much instilled in us that we did what we were supposed to do, and I think it was a little bit more structured then.
Mm-hmm. Well, you mentioned attending sporting events. What do you remember about the teams and the athletic events when you were in college?
I don't remember very much about that. I really don't remember very much about the sporting events then. I remember kind of seeing some of the wrestlers. I think, Myron Roderick, I think, was wrestling during that time. And then the heavyweight was Abdul. And I know OSU had really, really good wrestling team. And then I don't remember who some of the players were. I guess I should, but that to me, we went and we enjoyed it, and my late husband could tell you the names of all of them, through the years, but I didn't keep up with that as much.
Well, what were some of the traditions around homecoming? You had mentioned homecoming before.
I think it's kind of like it is now. It was real upbeat, and people would get really hyped up, and always want to beat whoever we were playing, especially K-State. And then, of course, Bedlam, when we played OU, was really, really hyped. But
were the house decks as important as they are now?
I don't think so. I think that started taking place more probably in the late 80s, right before my daughter got here in 91. It seems like that it was really, really strong. And when she left here, like in 95, 96, let's see, the last year we were here was 03. We came up in the fall of 03, and it was big then.
Did you have the parade? And
I don't remember the parade when I was here.
Okay.
In this, in the late 50s and 60. I don't remember the parade.
okay.
That was 50 years ago.
Yeah. Do you remember the first Pistol Pete mascot? Do you remember him being around while you were here on campus?
Pistol Pete was here when we were here. Yeah, and it's always been a favorite mascot.
In terms of getting away from campus, how often did you manage to go home while you were in school?
Not very much, because when I came here, I didn't have a car, and come from a poor family, poor farm family, and Mom and Dad brought me to campus and left me, and I had to find a ride home with friends. Then after I met my husband, I would ride home with him. He had a car. He was from Duke, Oklahoma, just outside Altus. And so, but we didn't go home very often. They didn't have the interstates fixed. We would have to go, what we call the back roads through, I guess, Kingfisher, Okarche, and down that way. We didn't have a lot of money, and we just didn't go home very often. Probably 2 or 3 times a semester was about it.
Did many students have cars on campus at that point?
No. My mom would make me clothes and mail them to me,
Always good to have a mom who's a seamstress. Do you remember any new buildings that were built while you were at OSU, or any new programs or majors that were added?
I can't remember the year that the Serenade Center was built, but it might have been somewhere around that time. And I believe they might have built the education classroom building somewhere about that time. I know that, I believe Stout was there in Willard. And the older part of HES making was there. They still had the veterans housing out there. None of those new apartments were built. And they were built about the time my daughter was here. But we're somewhere around 91 or so. And the dorms were not coeducational then, absolutely not. O Central was here. I believe Morrill was here. I believe that's where Extension was. And of course, Campus Corner was completely different. Seems like they might have built a new engineering building during that time, but I can't remember those specifics.
Well, it's at quite a distance at this point. So
50 years is a long time.
Exactly. Were there any big issues on campus when you were here?
No. I really wasn't into politics at that time.
And not even just political, but I mean any big trends, or with maybe some of the guys coming back from the Korean War, or if there were a lot of GIs on campus, people doing the GI Bill. I just didn't know if any of that was having an impact.
No, because Well, my husband went into the Army in, he was drafted in 59, late December of 59.
Okay.
And at that time, he had graduated in the summer, gotten his Bachelor of Fine Arts, and he didn't have a teaching certificate. So he went, I was teaching in Glencoe, and he started to school that fall or summer. I guess he took some classes that summer. And then working on his teaching certificate, and he had done his student teaching at the elementary school here in Stillwater, first grade in art, and then he was drafted the 1st of December. Well, he had already completed his student teaching and had everything finished, and they took him to Oklahoma City to the induction station on the bus around the 1st of December, and he called me and he said, "I don't have but a minute. You've got to listen to me. I'm headed to Fort Hood. Go and withdraw me from all of my classes."
And that was it.
And that's the way it was. And so that's what happened. I had to come over here we were living in Glencoe at the time, and he was carpooling with some people to the campus. And luckily he had everything done, and so they went ahead and gave him his teaching certificate. And I withdrew him, and then he started basic training at Fort Hood at Killeen, Texas. And then he got a furlough Christmas. He got a furlough. He came home and for, I guess, a week, and then he went back, and then I finished out through June at Glencoe, because I was on 12-month contract. And I finished out through June, and he had been transferred to Fort Sam Houston in San Antonio by then. He came and got me, and we moved to San Antonio. And so that was the year that I taught at Glencoe, and then got a job in San Antonio that next summer, the summer of '61. I think I got the dates right, but anyway, that was kind of a trying experience there.
Mm-hmm. And just to come up with some sort of finalizing comments on your time at OSU, how do you think attending OSU impacted your life?
Oh, tremendously. It was an experience. No one can tell you that there's no words to explain leaving home and going and having a college experience. When I graduated from high school, my daddy told me that, he said, "Honey, you can do whatever you want to do, but I'll tell you one thing, that if you get a college education, that's something that nobody can ever take away from you." And he said, "That's something that you'll have the rest of your life." And so I went for it.
Mm-hmm.
And when I came to, I knew that I wanted to come to OSU, but after the year down there, when I got some of my basics out of the way, and I was able to go home more. So by the time that I left Weatherford and came up here that next summer, then I was kind of ready to get in the groove and face college life, because I had lived on campus at Weatherford, and I knew at that point, I had enough experience with professors and studying and scheduling my time and knowing what I needed to do, that when I came up here, I was ready to really dig in and see the light at the end of the tunnel, where I could keep focused on on my education and to, become a successful member of society, I guess.
Well, and obviously your OSU experience influenced you because you've been involved with the Alumni Association down in Lawton. Do you want to talk just real briefly about that, your role there?
When my daughter started school up here in '91, Brad Burdick was our regional director down there, and Jerry Gill was the executive director. And my daughter got a job at the alumni office, and she volunteered me to Brad Burdick. Oh, my mom will be, because they were looking for someone to grab the Comanche County president's job and run with it. And so I said, okay. So I did. And so it was a great experience. It was a lot of work. It took a lot of time. Luckily, we had our own printing business. So I could print brochures and invitations and do the things that I make phone calls and solicit money, for the functions that we had. And my late husband was right there behind me because he bled orange. And so with her being at the Alumni Association, she did get a PLC scholarship. So she was plugged in, and she was on the Student Alumni Board. And so she was very much plugged into the alumni group. And that was wonderful because that kept her motivated, and it kept me motivated to work for the university and try to increase our Comanche County alumni group. So I guess I was president for 10 years. I haven't looked back on the records to see, because at the time I had sick parents and I was doing the alumni and I was trying to run a business, and things just kind of, I always took on more than I could probably handle. But it was wonderful, and it has instilled in her also a passion for, of course, being in the band and that kind of thing, But it has instilled in her a good work ethic and volunteerism. And there's just so many things that words cannot explain about your relationships with OSU and how much it helps you in your overall life.
Well, I want to thank you very much for your time today and for sitting here and taking time out of your schedule when I know it's very busy with homecoming week. But thank you so much for coming in, and thank you for being part of this project.
Well, I hope that some little things will help, and I really have enjoyed it. It's been a fantastic time. We always just love to come back to the campus, and it's a special place, and they do such a wonderful job. I tell you, the first time that I talked to Judy Horn the other day, when I really found out that we probably would be able to come, I mean, everybody has been so kind and so helpful, and the arrangements have just been wonderful, and we had a great time this morning, and it's just been fabulous. And then that they did honor me with Alumni Service Award. I believe it was 1995. I don't know if you knew about that or not. I looked for the little brochure, but there were 5 of us that year that they honored. Mr. Ellis from Hobart, and me, and I can't remember the names of the other fine people that had, helped with alumni organizations. And that was such an honor. I was so shocked. But everybody that I've worked with here, they've just been wonderful.
Well, thank you again for your service to OSU and for talking to us today. We do appreciate it.
I enjoyed it, Mary. Thank you.
Thank you.